Welcome to The Truth About Health, this show all about giving you information they don't want you to hear, the facts they've hidden, studies they've buried, and the choices that actually put you back in control of your health in a world that's spinning out of control. Today, we're joined by Razi Berry, founder and publisher of NDNR, the Journal of Applied Natural Medicine. For over 21 years, she's been on the front lines, publishing more than 2,100 clinical case reports from naturopathic and integrative doctors while tracking FDA, NIH, and CDC policy in real time. She's bringing that unique insider view to today's biggest health shifts under the current administration. We're going to be diving into the testosterone crisis, truth about chemical sunscreens and gut hormones, what's changing with HRT and bioidentical hormones, the peptide battle, new homeopathy legislation, and how the exposome ties it all together. We're going to get her advice on how to pronounce that correctly too. Every week we're going to cut through the noise so you can make better decisions for you and your family. Just note the disclaimer here: the information in this broadcast is not to be taken as specific medical or health related advice. This is for broad dissemination and education only. You are encouraged to seek qualified medical and health professionals for your personal needs. All right, now let's get to the truth with Razi Berry. Razi, thank you so much for joining me again, covering some very hot topics. A lot of people are concerned about their hormone levels in general. It does seem, though, that even the medical industrial complex takes this testosterone issue more seriously than they do when it comes to women's hormone problems. That's just my impression. It seems like doctors will eagerly and willingly help guys out with testosterone, but it seems when women need help that it's like they make you jump through hoops. I don't know if you have any feeling like that.
Well, I do think that women tend to be sort of more, I hate to use the word marginalized, but a lot of women's health conditions historically are treated as like hysteria or mind-body issues, emotional issues. So I do think I agree. Men can tend to be less overt about their health. They're less likely to seek out a doctor. It's usually the sister, wife, mom, partner that kind of helps make that happen. But I do agree. I think that, women's health care is, thank God we're paying more attention to it. But the testosterone issue is significant. Women need and make testosterone also. It's important for female health and wellness, but men's testosterone levels are sharply on the decline. I think over 56% decline since 1973. That's the year I was born. And that is shocking because it's across all ages. It's not just age related. And that is the real epidemic here. So with sperm production and just overall androgenic expression, it's a real problem. It's a problem with fertility. And it's very shocking. I think 1% per year is the decline, which is very, very scary.
And so what do you think is driving this all of a sudden huge testosterone decline?
Well, that's a good question. And that's why I'm glad that the administration is starting to take a look at this, because historically it was thought that it was just age related, right? We just kind of assumed that it's normal to become less vital as we age, but this is not necessarily the case. And what we're seeing is, of course, the exposome, which is the word that you were using earlier.
That I was struggling with, Razi.
And I might even, everyone says it a little bit differently, of course, too, but it's really everything that we are exposed to that can tend to disrupt our hormones. And especially, testosterone is really where the light is being shown right now. So hormone disruptors are finally being recognized, and it's EMF, that type of electromagnetic field exposure, plastics, chemicals and residue from pharmaceuticals in the water supply, fluoride in the water supply, plastics and the bisphenols from plastics. So you might have heard the word or the term BPA, bisphenol A, but there are others. There's BPS, BPF, Important to know also, because sometimes people will look for a water bottle, for instance, that says it's BPA free. But Kristi, it doesn't mean that it's BPS free or BPF free. So you want things to, all plastic is really problematic, to be honest. And then, of course, there's also the seed oils and chemicals in our food. Now, the problem, see, hormones are they signal the body's processes at billionth and trillion parts per billion and parts per trillion, I'm sorry. And so that means that very small exposures can affect the cell, because your body is really primed to get these signals in very tiny, minuscule amounts. And so that's why these environmental toxins are very problematic, because it's not just the amount, it's even the tiniest exposures that can get through the cell wall. They can damage the DNA, which are the instruction set, the instruction manual for your cells and for making hormones. And then the mitochondria is that sort of energy powerhouse of the cell that helps fuel and energize that process. So when your body is trying to make its testosterone, there's also these feedback loops that get interrupted. Some of these toxins act like estrogens, and that can disrupt that feedback system. Your body, has many different metabolic processes going on all at once, and they listen to each other and they respond. And so that is why all of these chemical problems are so problematic. Cologne is a really big issue too. I have 2 teenage daughters, and their male friends wear cologne, and it is one of the biggest disruptors of hormones. So men, if you're listening, or women, tell the men in your lives to find other ways. Just enjoy those natural pheromones. You can just stay clean and use like natural deodorants. But they're just pervasive, Kristi, throughout our whole environment.
Yeah, it's so scary. And I mean, this is a bit unrelated, but I mean, as we've seen testosterone decreasing, we've also seen things like gender confusion increasing. And I mean, some of that is, I think, social pressure and things like that with social media, like what's trendy or clicky, or making people ask themselves questions that perhaps they wouldn't have. But do you think that some of this hormone disruption could be playing a part in all the gender confusion?
I think that it can. I mean, puberty is a time of rapid change that's mediated by hormones. It can be scary, and we also, as we grow, we look to our environment to learn how to move through these changes. We have mirror neurons that we copy and mimic what we see happen. That's why, like, birds of a feather flock together. So when a child is going through a time of rapid hormonal changes, they're feeling new feelings that they haven't before, and if they can be influenced by a hormone disruption, and then also socially as well. So they have looked at places like in the Amish where they aren't online at all and don't fall into any exposure of social exposure, and they just don't see any of that confusion happening. And then we also know the pesticides that have been known to disrupt these hormones as well. That's why it's important to monitor your whole exposome socially, as you mentioned, Kristi. I'm so glad that you brought that up. Who you spend your time with, and then, of course, also the food and water that you drink, the cookware that you use, how you store your food and water, and the types of body products you put on your body. Your skin is, of course, the largest organ, and a lot of topicals have nanoparticles that do get into the lymphatic and the blood supply, affecting, all of these processes that we're talking about. So I agree, it is multifactorial, and that's why I believe, and what we publish in the Journal of Applied Natural Medicine, is that there are many things we don't have a whole lot of control of that we unfortunately need to rely on, like the administration and such, to take a look at. But we, as individuals, as parents, need to really do the best that we can to avoid the exposures we do have control over.
Okay. Now, you mentioned the FDA and government intervention for things that are harder for us to control. And it does seem that they've made some changes around testosterone therapy. So, what has happened, and why does it matter?
Well, the first thing is the FDA has recommended removing the Schedule 3 designation from testosterone replacement therapy. Schedule 3 makes it harder to prescribe. It's more restricted. And then because of that, there's also sometimes a little taboo behind it. It's like in the same category as like some pain medications, narcotic medications, and even some anesthesia. So recommendation to remove that would make doctors more likely to prescribe it, and patients would have more access. Also, they're going to narrow some of the restrictions with regard to prostate cancer. So it will be available or recommended for even during prostate cancer as long as it hasn't metastasized, and also for BPH. Individuals with BPH, it will be narrowed so they can still recommend it for that. Furthermore, the FDA is recommending to even use it for libido issues, which is something that has kind of had to be done off label in the past, and it's been harder for men to get access to that. So, all in all, I think it's fantastic. However, you have to remember testosterone replacement therapy is still not treating the cause, it is still treating a symptom. And in the therapeutic order, which is part of the naturopathic philosophy, you do want to start with the lowest force interventions first. So establishing what the exposures are, strengthening your body system, strengthening your sleep, your movement, your diet, before moving into even supplements and even into replacement therapies. So I think it's a really good thing, but I hope that people don't just jump there first, because you can be, eating off of nonstick pans and not getting any sleep and drinking out of plastic water bottles. And then you're just like, there's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, if you just are adding testosterone replacement therapy and not looking at what really the cause is beneath it.
No, that makes sense. What are some other possible risks that men should evaluate? Because for years, men were warned that testosterone therapy could be dangerous for the heart. So, is there any
Yes.
truth to that? What does the latest research show?
So a new study looked at that and said that there was no real risk to heart disease and stroke. I think that there still is some cause, which is why you don't want to just go online or talk to someone that is not a qualified healthcare professional, especially an integrative or functional medicine or a naturopathic physician, to look at other signs and symptoms, because you don't want to just look at your blood test levels. You want to look at everything else, also the rest of your lifestyle. So just because something is now recommended doesn't mean it's totally safe. Everything has an effect. I think side effect is kind of a silly term because they're just effects. And with these therapies and these hormones, there are positive effects and negative effects. But I think it is good news.
Absolutely. And so, if someone suspects that they may be low testosterone, the first step is to just go to your doctor, maybe ask for some blood labs or something like that.
Yes, you'd want them to look at labs. There's also special labs that you can go to, like a more integrative or naturopathic physician that look at other labs too, and not just the blood testosterone levels. You can also look at body fluids like saliva and urine. They're also going to want to take a history that is much more comprehensive, because I think we talked in another segment, like what you do for work could be exposing you to something, or just a lifestyle. Maybe you have air freshener in your car that's impacting your hormones. And so sometimes doing those simple changes by eliminating that. So a doctor will look at what that bigger picture is, look at what your diet is, how you're sleeping. Our hormones are really regulated at nighttime. It's very important. It's when we grow and it's when we heal. So you'll want to make sure you have a comprehensive intake, and having somebody on your healthcare team, Kristi, that really listens to you. And if I could just for a minute say that I think this is one of the most important things you can do. I hear from people every day that email us saying that like their doctor doesn't listen to them. It's not always the doctor's fault. Conventional doctors are so busy, Kristi. They have to see, 6, 7 patients per hour, and they just don't have the time. They don't always get the chance to read everything in the chart. And so you want to put together a healthcare team with people who really do listen to you. We can have white coat syndrome sometimes and be afraid or intimidated. Sometimes doctors get angry. I hear that a lot as well. So I'm not here to bash doctors, but I am here to say that you are going to be the person that looks out for your health the most. You can't totally outsource that. You have to ask questions, do research. You can print out studies and bring it to your doctor. And if they're not open-minded, then just find other people on your team that are willing to listen.
Excellent. And last time that we talked a bit about some changes in availability for safer sunscreens. But can also be related to this topic of hormones, or these chemical sunscreens. I was just at a skin doctor the other day, and she was hammering me about sunscreens. So, what is the concern with chemical sunscreens specifically?
This is just, I'm so glad that this is coming to light now, because you're exactly right. I feel like sunscreen has almost become this religious ritual, so to speak. Parks and playgrounds everywhere, people just all over the place are just slathering themselves with sunscreen, afraid to leave the house without sunscreen. And now we know what naturopathic and integrative doctors have been saying for a long time, that these chemicals do get into your bloodstream, they get into your lymph, and they are dangerous. And so now, right now, a new sunscreen was recommended. I keep saying the name incorrectly, Kristi, but it is because oxybenzone was one of the ones that was most used that has been banned now. But it's called bemotrizonol. I can't even say that word, so I apologize. But that and zinc and topical more barriers, like wearing long sleeves like gauze or cotton, and just being in the sun when it's safe. But these compounds have, like, more than 1,300 of these chemical compounds have been banned in Europe, and only just like 30 have been banned in the United States. But what happens is, once they enter your bloodstream, either through your lymph or just directly from the skin, is they disrupt the hormone producing cells in your gut. Now, I think we talked last time about serotonin, and a lot of people now know, it's no secret anymore, that serotonin is largely made in the gut. But so are other peptides and hormones that regulate hunger and satiety. And one of them, Kristi, is GLP-1. So here we have this movement of GLP-1 drugs being so popular for blood sugar and for weight loss. But these chemicals that we're putting and slathering on our skin every single day are actually disrupting your body's own GLP-1. And so I think that's something that people need to pay attention to. We're using these exogenous peptides and hormones, and many people are seeing great results. But nothing is without an effect, of course. And so it was just wild when I learned that the GLP-1 that your body actually makes are being inhibited and disrupted by these sunscreens and other toxins as well. So, safe sun really matters. Burning isn't good, but I think we are realizing finally that the sun is healthy, that our body's response to the sun is healthy. And I think when we really see sun damage and skin cancers, I believe, and from the research I've read in the studies, or the case studies that we've published, is it's really when you're disrupting the hormones, because melanin is a hormone. So when you're disrupting that through the seed oils or chemicals, pesticides, plastics, I think then your body doesn't mount the proper response. And that's when we lead to skin issues.
Interesting. Yeah, it's so wild to think that sunscreen could be affecting your weight, but it's like I was reading some articles about how your gut and like the hormones of the gut are it's like a whole different brain in your body, which is wild to think of.
It's such a miracle. I mean, the second brain, it's really wild. That's why a lot of times kids, when they're young, they can't express if they're anxious or if they're scared, they often will have a stomach ache. Maybe you have a child who repeatedly doesn't want to go to a certain lesson or go to someone's house, or having trouble at school. They're having stomach aches. It's important to listen to those because kids don't always know how to verbalize how they're feeling, but their body absolutely knows. And we also know that you can have butterflies in your stomach, right? Those are other hormones that give you kind of this fluttery, happy feeling. That's because the serotonin and other hormones that are made in the gut, or if we're very nervous, we can feel nauseous. Somebody's about to step on stage and maybe they'll even throw up. So you can learn a lot from listening to your gut, and there's real physiology behind that.
Interesting. So we've talked a bit about testosterone and touched upon, hormones in general, but let's talk about women and how, they are getting more access to hormone therapy. The FDA removed the black box warning. What changed and what was wrong with the original warning? I mean, as I said before we got into the testosterone subject, it seemed like there was all this gatekeeping for when women needed hormone help, basically, but not quite as much for men. So what was up with that?
Well, I'm glad you asked this because this is so important. So what they found is the study that was done that caused the black box warning on hormone replacement therapy for women was done with women aged like in their 60s and 70s, which is long past menopause. And so they took another look at the research and found that when you actually give a woman access to hormone replacement therapy earlier, that it has a lot of protection for like bone density and bone health, because we know that as you age, fractures can be very detrimental. And it also can help with cognitive issues as well. So what that black box warning is the strictest warning that the FDA can issue. The next step after that is taking something off the market. So a lot of women were not given access to hormone replacement therapy because, doctors were afraid or they didn't want to deal with some of those restrictions. And so now that has been lifted, women are being encouraged to look at HRT earlier so they can have, longer, more protective effects. Now, hormones still do have some negative side effects. So just because there's access to something, same with the testosterone, doesn't mean that it's totally without any risk. So it's another reason why you don't want to go this alone. You want to go with a doctor that's going to actually spend a lot of time with you. Again, just the world that I live in, and my bias is through a naturopathic physician or an integrative medicine physician who's going to look at everything, as your body systems are interconnected. There's also a difference between HRT and BHRT. The HRT stands for hormone replacement therapy, and BHRT is bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. So HRT can be synthetic. I'll give you an example. Premarin is one, and Premarin stands for pregnant mare urine. It's derived from horse urine, the hormones in horse urine, or they're synthetic. Whereas BHRT is derived from more natural sources, often plants, and it's more biocompatible, more bioidentical. And when you want to think of something biocompatible, it's just like, for instance, if you have a diesel car, it runs on diesel gas, and you don't want to put unleaded in a diesel engine. It's just more optimized. It's more congruent with your body. And so you can also go to compounding pharmacies where they especially will compound without fillers or without allergens. So that's my favorite route to go. So you can find a doctor or talk to a compounding pharmacist to help you with that. But all in all, I think that there's like two sides to everything. I'm excited that the ban's been lifted, but I worry that maybe people might just rush to the jump and think that's going to be the end all. Again, you don't want to rush to hormone replacement therapy if you're not optimizing your sleep, your diet, your relationships. movement. Again, it kind of might get boring after a while, but the things that matter are the most basic because you're just building that foundation for health. But I think it's a win for women everywhere that they're going to have better access to the hormone replacement therapy.
And you kind of briefly touched upon this, but why does it matter, you think, what kind of a doctor manages it? Is it because of like certain doctors will just do the synthetic HRT as opposed to the bioidentical, or how do they approach it differently?
Thank you for asking this, Kristi. And I'm sorry I didn't clarify this sooner. But so they're going to look at all the body systems, like for instance, cortisol. If your cortisol, your stress hormones are off balance, that can negatively affect how you're processing or how you're synthesizing your own hormones and how your body is going to react. Also, you want to look at your thyroid, your adrenal hormones. And so integrative and naturopathic doctors sort of look at a larger spectrum. They also look at other types of testing like saliva and urine that are sometimes indicated. A lot of hormones are also made in your gut or mediated by your gut. So they're going to want to optimize your gut health, look at your diet, look at your microbiome. You can test through stool, or even there's even testing for vaginal microbiome. So they're just going to take a bigger picture and ask more questions and really understand your unique makeup and history. And also, again, back to that word, the exposome, everything you're exposed to every day. And, some people are on a swim team, and so they're exposed to a lot more chlorine than the average person is. And so sometimes there's questions that you wouldn't even realize that are important to ask. And you're going to get that from more of a naturopathic physician or a functional or integrative doctor.
I feel like we as women don't really start thinking about these things until we start entering perimenopause or menopause. I was reading that like 6,000 women a day enter menopause, which is crazy. So, I mean, are women getting access to the right care? I mean, even I myself, I'm 44, I have hot flashes like every morning, but I mean, I also had a baby a year and a half ago. So I'm like, I can't be like entering menopause, I just had a baby, so it's like, and then if it is perimenopause, like how long does that go on? I mean, I feel like there's so much that's kind of overwhelming and confusing being around this age.
Yeah. Well, you're tying it all together and you're asking the right questions. So there's definitely hormone fluctuations after having a baby, especially if you're, maybe you're breastfeeding or maybe you're not. And so your hormones are realigning in that way. And perimenopause can last a decade, so it can be a slow change. But what I want to remind women is that perimenopause and menopause are not diseases. They're a natural part of life, and they have their challenges, just like puberty did, right? Puberty had its own set of challenges, but it does have side effects. And I think the side effects that we feel, or the symptoms I meant to say, a lot of it has to do with just we don't have as robust of an immune system because of our microbiome. And we also, every day, we're just under attack from so many chemical exposures. And so I think it can make it more difficult. One side effect, or I'm using the wrong word, I apologize, but one symptom can be like frozen shoulder, or even like Achilles tendon pain. And sometimes people will go and they'll go to a personal trainer, or they'll go to an orthopedic doctor, and then they'll go on some kind of pain medicine or an anti-inflammatory medicine. And really what it is it has to do with changing levels of estrogen, because they can cause prostaglandin expression and cause some inflammation as well. So these are other reasons why when you are approaching perimenopause, it might be good to just meet with a functional or naturopathic or integrative doctor and just say, hey, I'm going into this new season of life. I'm noticing these symptoms that I didn't have before, and they can help you move the most gracefully through these changes.
And on that note, I mean, we were talking about hormone disruption, which can happen at any age because of all these things that we're exposed to on on the daily. So, I mean, is there a particular age you would want to start thinking about HRT, or is that something that you can ask at really any age if you're concerned about hormone disruption or
I would,
needing hormone
yeah,
therapy?
I mean, I personally think that the less intervention is the best. So I would say as soon as you are noticing symptoms that are uncomfortable would be the time to start asking. And you can do this with a child through puberty. A doctor's not going to recommend HRT. Well, actually, I take that back. Some conventional doctors, they'll just put your daughter on birth control pill, which now we're learning is just a terrible idea. They'll say, oh, it'll clear up your skin. But, I'm kind of speaking also, this is my opinion from everything that I've read and published. But you can always see if there's nutrient deficiencies. You could, for somebody who's entering puberty, in your years of childbearing, you can find ways to optimize your fertility. There's nutrient and mineral or seed cycling that can help you really support your cycle, and then going again into perimenopause. So I think there's never a time that isn't right to seek the advice of a naturopathic or integrative doctor, but it just sort of depends. Like if you're swimmingly going through a part of your life and you don't really seem to have any trouble, then just keep trying to optimize your health. But if you're having troubles with sleep or with your skin or recurrent bladder infections or low mood, then that is a sign. It's like the red light on your car to go speak to someone. And just like if you wanted to improve, your tennis game, or you wanted to build muscle, you might see a trainer. If you needed legal advice on a contract, you'd go see an attorney. If you wanted to play the violin or piano better, you'd go to a tutor. And if you want to just address symptoms that are troublesome, think of it that way. Think of going to a professional, something you're investing in yourself to take a look at how to optimize each season of your life.
We talked about GLP-1 a little bit, and maybe we wouldn't feel like we need the support if our own natural GLP-1 production wasn't interrupted by all these environmental factors and everything. But I feel like it's almost like trendy how much you see and hear about GLP-1, and then I would say the same thing about peptides. Like all of a sudden, I'm hearing all this stuff about peptides. And to be frank, I'm like, what even are they? Like, what is this new trend? So maybe you can help me understand about
Yes.
peptides and how it perhaps relates to the GLP-1 craze.
Yes. So peptides are small chains or fragments of proteins that help a metabolic process in your body. So that process could be immune function, it could be digestion, it could be blood sugar regulation, it could be satiety, which is the feeling of being full. It can be growing, muscle building, like with growth hormone. So peptides are these signaling molecules, and you make them endogenously. That word means you make them in your own body. And what exogenous, or ones that are made outside of your body, peptides are, they're just a way to help facilitate whatever action that is. So whether it's BPC, which helps with like healing and gut healing, or it's the GLP-1 that helps regulate blood sugar and satiety, these are drugs, so to speak, that do impact your body at a cellular and molecular level. So anytime you introduce something like that, there are going to be effects that we don't know. And the use of peptides is pretty new. A lot of clinicians, however, see a lot of safety behind them. And what the government did is they restricted the ability for compounders to make these available, which made it harder for patients to get these compounds. So something that the administration has done is said, we're taking another look at this. I think it's next month in July, around the same time this week in July, they're going to be voting on how to move forward. I think it's a good thing when compounding pharmacies can make something available, because honestly, compounding pharmacists are like having another provider. You can consult with them. They can tailor something, again, without certain excipients or certain types of allergens, and they tend to really study that a little bit deeper than maybe a pharmacist at just like a retail pharmacy. But we talked a little bit ago about how all these endocrine disruptors can influence our cells and our hormones and our immune system. And it takes just a tiny, tiny amount to impact that, because that's how it works in nature. You know, we have various parts per million or trillion of a compound is how our body is sort of designed to react. And so there's still a lot of unknown with the peptides, but like I said, I'm making them more available, allows more doctors to, try to optimize it with patients. And they are, we don't know everything about peptides, and I'm sort of all over the place. I hope maybe we can edit part of this, but I think it's good news whenever regulation is important, but we also need to have health freedom. There is risk with freedom. That's, I think, the most important thing. It's like, do we want to have a nanny state telling us like what we can or can't do with our own health? No, I think the most important thing is allow access with informed consent. So as long as we are constantly researching and letting patients and doctors understand what the clinical effects are of any medicine, any drug, any vitamin, any supplement, the people should just be free to use that, as long as there's true informed consent, that a patient knows exactly what they're getting into.
So I guess I didn't understand that fully before. These GLP-1s like tirzepatide, trying to think of like Ozempic, like these are actually considered peptides themselves?
Yes, they're peptide mimics. They mimic the peptide. So they're a synthetic version of a peptide that your own body makes.
Okay, and since this seems to be like the most popular peptide that you hear of, you hear about those way more than you do some of the others that you mentioned. It seems like that's another one of those like very divisive topics. What do you think as far as like, I feel like using these would normally be something people that are like for natural medicine would be hesitant to do, but like there are some that speak very positively about the intervention. I mean, even the fact that Kennedy has come out and talked about reducing the cost and things like that to have more access, because we have an epidemic of obesity in our country. I mean, bottom line, do you think that we need to approach things like that as like a last resort, or embrace this health that science gives us?
And this is why I think it's important they're made available, because I know naturopathic doctors who microdose GLP-1s with patients, and they have all sort of like anti-inflammatory effects and others. And so that's how you kind of learn how these are working in the body. However, I also think that the best way to deal with obesity is not just take a drug or a pill, because we're not changing behavior, we're not optimizing a healthy lifestyle. So I think that's important. But, sometimes people need a little push to get more motivated. I also know people in my world that are on GLP-1s, and it's given them like a new sense of confidence to start exercising more, to start eating right. So it's really so personalized. It's hard to make a blanket statement. I have some of my own personal biases. I tend to err more on the side of very natural. Like I prefer everything from nutrition. And then if there's deficiencies, or I'm going through a time of illness or stress or something, then I try to optimize that through supplements, nutraceuticals, which I do use. And other people are kind of more into the, scientific and biohacking world, where they think, hey, let's use all of these tools as long as we're using them safely. So it's really a personal choice. But there's another issue with the GLP-1s I think is really important to talk about. And that is, when you lose weight rapidly, your body is eliminating a lot of toxins that are lipophilic. They're stored in fat. And what that can do is it can cause that to recirculate into your bloodstream. And it's like having a new exposure to these toxins. So what we've published for a long time at NDNR.com is the importance of working with a patient's detoxification while they're going through weight loss. And this is even more important now with patients that are on GLP-1 type drugs, like Ozempic, for instance, because they're going to be losing weight rapidly. They're going to be introducing a lot of the toxins that are stored in fat back into the bloodstream. Also your bone marrow, your brain. Fat isn't just the fat that you have like on your thighs and your gut. And so it's another reason why I think it's so important to not just go online and get one of these weight loss drugs. I think it's really important that you talk to a healthcare professional, have a full consult, talk about, again, these exposures. They can help you manage that. And so I think that's very important.
Excellent. That is, on that note, how then do you go down the path of detox? Is there a certain kind of detox that you recommend more than another? Or?
I think it's good to just do it all. So drinking a lot of water, sweating. We know that patients often won't express like cadmium or even some mercury in their urine or blood, but they have found it in their sweat. So sweating is a way that you can detox outside of your kidneys and your liver, which help you detox as well. Lymphatic massage is important. Movement is important, because if you aren't moving, then your body isn't moving the lymph and helping it get through, your organ systems for elimination. Sauna is studied to be really good at helping with detoxification as well. There are certain herbs like cilantro. They can help your body chelate or hold on to minerals. And of course, having enough fiber helps your body to eliminate toxins. So like if you are trying to eliminate toxins, but then you're not moving your bowels, then that can sort of redistribute as well. Some people do colon hydrotherapy, for instance, sometimes to do that. But it's really is important to make sure that you're getting good nutrition so you can detox. And then there are other types, like you can take glutathione, for instance, that's your body's own kind of part of the detox pathway as well. There was a lot of news recently about Tylenol, how it disrupts your glutathione synthesis, which is a master antioxidant. And that is something that you can also take in supplement form. I wouldn't do that, again, without really talking to your healthcare professional, because you want to make sure sometimes you need to use binders like charcoal or other supplements to help you kind of bind that as you're releasing it. So detoxification is something that you don't want to do without really thinking it through, making sure you get plenty of rest as well.
Trying to get that rest. That can be a challenge when you have children and everything else. But yeah, try and make that a priority, even if it's just like 20-minute naps in between things. But let's talk about, since we spent some time on that, let's talk about like the more natural approach and homeopathy and how that's been attacked. I mean, it's wild to me that like even trying to address things naturally has been so rejected by our mainstream medical society. I mean, to act like things that are natural are more dangerous than the things that they have contrived is just absolutely wild. But something happened with the FDA and homeopathy in 2022 that a lot of people missed. And so can you break that down for us?
So basically, it made advertising homeopathic medicines illegal, but it didn't take them off the market. And so it became this sort of purgatory zone where it got really difficult for homeopathic companies and patients and providers who utilize homeopathic medicines. But homeopathic medicines were, since the 1930s have been regulated just fine without incident. But I'm telling you, Kristi, there are very few topics in medicine that will make the naysayers go more vapid and crazy and just foaming at the mouth as they do with homeopathy. I don't know why they just hate homeopathy so much. But homeopathy is going to win in the end, and it's going to be vindicated because there is emerging research that supports that homeopathy, which is very, very minute dilutions of an active substance, there are studies that are showing that it acts like a nanomedicine. Now, this is sort of coming full circle of all the things we've been talking about, hormones and endocrine disruptors and toxins and the way that they enter the cell, because these are at nano particles, right there. It's like nanometers. And what's happening with the homeopathy is it's showing that these do have very low levels of active constituents. And sometimes the lower the level, the more powerful it can be. Breast Cancer Action Network did a lot of publishing on this about breast cancer and exposure to toxins, that sometimes it's the lower level of the toxins that really can get more into the cell, because they do mimic or act like a peptide or like a hormone or like a cell signaling peptide. So homeopathic medicine works on that nano level, and there is a bill right now that we're hoping wins, and that will really help bring back the accessibility and the confidence, so homeopathic companies and providers can really go back to just helping patients feel better. Homeopathy is so safe and gentle. It can be used with children and pets. I was not a believer about homeopathy. I actually I didn't believe in homeopathy. And then someone that was in naturopathic medical school, he also he was learning it and he didn't really believe it. And then his cat got sick. And he gave this homeopathic remedy to the cat, and the cat got better. Well, we could say that is just maybe a coincidence or whatever. But then when I was pregnant with my first daughter, I had such horrible morning sickness that it was affecting my sleep. I would just have cyclical vomiting, and I was willing to try anything. So my husband got a homeopathic remedy called tobacum, which is a homeopathic preparation of tobacco. And it stopped my vomiting and my nausea instantly. And I was just absolutely shocked. So after that, I was a believer in homeopathy, and now I've used it for myself and for my children. And it's a very gentle yet powerful medicine. Now, here's the thing with homeopathy and herbal medicine is that we've been sort of brainwashed, Kristi, to want it to work fast and in the same way that a pharmaceutical does, because a pharmaceutical is a high force intervention, and it's just turning something off or turning something on, or it's getting in the way, right? It's like turning off a fever, or it's just mass killing, good and bad bacteria. But homeopathic medicines work in a different way at a more energetic level. We are energetic beings. We have piezoelectric energy in our bones and in our cells. And when we walk, that's activated. When we move our muscles, that's activated. So if anybody tells you that energy medicine is woo-woo, it's just not the truth. Our heart uses that same energy, that same electricity to beat. And all of our cells divide and replicate and heal through this energy. And so homeopathic medicines work in the same way. I'm really kind of dumbing it down. It's a lay person. I'm a lay person. I'm not a doctor. I just have published what doctors do, and I've read the research as a researcher and a journalist for 21 years. But homeopathic medicine, I'm very excited. A lot of MAHA groups and moms groups are really behind this bill. So hopefully we will prevail.
How do we even define homeopathy anymore? What is considered that? Just anything that is plant derived, that is from nature? I mean, how do we even define what's considered a homeopathic intervention anymore?
Well, a homeopathic remedy is a substance that does have an effect on physiology. So it can be mineral, animal. It can be like a venom. There's bee venom and scorpion venom even. It can be any plant. And it is the constituent is very much diluted. And then it goes through something called a succussion, which it is this vibrational agitation of it to sort of really activate the constituents after it's been diluted. And that is what the different dilutions mean, like 1X or 1M. And so you can buy homeopathic medicines over the counter, absolutely, or you can work with a healthcare provider to help you find the same one, but they're so natural because, again, they have the imprint, the energetic imprint of the constituent, but they don't have the actual, therapeutic amount. And so it's a whole different paradigm, and it's a whole different way of looking at the body, just like traditional Chinese medicine or acupuncture is a different way. And so I love that you on this show are open-minded to talk about all of these things.
Yes, of course. And as we tie all this together, we've mentioned this word that was difficult for me at the beginning quite a bit already, but let's tie it all together with talking about the exposome. Hopefully I got it better that time. Thinking of, it helped when you told me that it's like you're thinking about what you're exposed to. So that makes sense that it's pronounced in that way. So for our audience, I mean, is that essentially what it means? Just anything you're exposed to is your exposome?
Yes, and so when you look at how they mapped the genome, well, the NIH said last year that they're going to try to map the exposome. So they're going to try to map everything that we are exposed to that impact chronic disease. And it has been published that as much of 90% of chronic disease is from this exposome, or these multiple exposures, visible and invisible, that we encounter every day, even before birth, right? Newborn babies are born already with these phthalates and plastics and other toxins already in their bloodstream. So they're hoping to look deeper at all of these different exposures and take a look about how we can do our best to mitigate what they are. Europe does have stricter standards with a lot of chemicals and fragrances and food additives. And so hopefully we'll move more in that direction. But let's take a look at what you're exposed to from morning to night, right? You wake up in the morning and maybe you have LED light bulbs. And that already is an exposure that we know can impact Parkinson's disease, dementia diseases, early puberty, hormone disruption, even expression of testosterone. Then you get up and you go get in the shower, and maybe there's chlorine in the water, and you turn on the shower and those chlorines turn into chloramine, which is also a known carcinogen. And then you brush your teeth with fluoride, and maybe there are some other additives in the toothpaste that disrupt your gut microbiome, which can affect, for a child, it can affect your IQ level, for instance. And also that affects your hormone production, which can affect you from puberty to fertility to perimenopause to menopause and beyond. And then there's plastics in the makeup that a woman puts on your face, or the cologne and aftershave that person might put on when they're getting ready. And then they head out the door and they go and they drive through coffee that's lined in a plastic cup. And those plasticizers are now, they're consuming those. And it just is, and then there's the air, like the breakdown of the tires gets into the air, and factories and car exhaust nearby can get into your lungs and get into your brain, and that can affect your cognition over time. And so I don't say any of this to scare anyone, because it just might seem like, oh, let's just give up. But this is why we want to work so hard at reducing the exposures we can. And if you look at the work of like Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride, who I just adore, and she is the author of something called the GAPS diet, the Gut and Psychology Syndrome diet. She talks about how when you have a really healthy digestion, really healthy gut microbiome, that your body can beautifully break down many of these toxins, even metals, even pesticides, even chemicals. So having, eating healthy food, paying attention to your microbiome, and avoiding toxins whenever you can, using the most natural you can, using inert serveware and cookware like glass instead of plastic, and also laughing a lot, enjoying life, sleeping well, surrounding yourself with people that make you feel supported and good. These are ways that we can sort of protect ourselves from this exposome.
Excellent. I mean, when you break it down, like how many things we could potentially be exposed to each day, it makes you feel like we should all just be doing detox plans. I mean, because it's overwhelming when you break it down like that.
It can be overwhelming. It can be. And I'm reading so much of this every day for the past 20 years that it can be really overwhelming. And that's why I think, though, that the body is so wise, it's been so intelligently designed, and we just have to do our best to make the choices that are, taking the best care of ourselves and those that we love. And I also think, again, having a good attitude and just laughing is probably one of the very best things that you can do for resilience. And so if you can find ways, like I just recently, my house caught on fire 2 weeks ago, and I was at an integrative medicine like meetup, get together with some colleagues last night, and they're like, your house burned? And I just told a joke, and they're like, wow, how can you laugh about it? It's like, well, if I don't laugh about it, I would just be crying right now. So laughing can help you get through the day and prioritize what needs to be done. And it's my number one tip. And that's how I move through these many aspects of our exposome.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, you're a naturopathic health science publisher, so you do have hope. But, do you feel like there's not being done about all of these things? I mean, it can be very discouraging to see like basically anything RFK Jr. does and make strides in it. It seems like some federal judge or there's pushback from one way or another. Because I know he was even addressing the fluoride issue, and it seems he was getting pushback from that as well. So, do you think that with enough pushing, we'll finally be able to make some changes?
I hope so, but I feel like we can't just put it all on the government's shoulders or all on his shoulders. We can vote with our dollars. I mean, we can ban, we can not worry about fluoride in toothpaste if we just don't buy fluoride with toothpaste. If we really control the things that we want to, like maybe just bring your own cup if you go get coffee. If everyone made these choices, then the market for things would diminish. If you mostly bought your meat from the most local rancher that you can, then the stores would say, hey, we're losing too much money. We need to start bringing this into our stores. If you just buy organic, then, and I know everybody, I'll probably get hate mail, we can't afford organic, but there are ways to prioritize. And it's just, we have to deal with the reality of what we are. We can't just give up and say, oh, I'm going to eat it anyway. We have to try to prioritize when we can. But I think that what we need to do is make the choices that will affect the market. And then we get on the government for the things that we don't have control of, like the way companies can, dispose of chemical runoff, or the data centers. We can get together as communities and say, we don't want these toxins in our environment. Oh, I don't want a 5G tower in my children's school or right next to my home. So if we make these decisions and, stop buying plastic bottles, stop buying water in plastic bottles, get a big glass bottle delivered, or buy a water filter. And you'll save a lot of money that way too. And then the market will change, because companies will supply things in two ways. They'll either supply what consumers are buying, or they will supply what the government is subsidizing. And so I think that we should split the battle that way. Just fight those battles that we don't have control over, but really come together for the ones that we do have control over.
Excellent. Well, I think we covered just about everything that we could for this hour. So thank you so much again, Razi, for joining us on The Truth About Health. Where can people find you and stay up to date on these issues?
Well, you can go to our website, the Journal of Applied Natural Medicine, and it's at NDNR.com. That stands for Naturopathic Doctor News and Review, so NDNR.com. You can sign up for our newsletter, so you can every few weeks, you can learn how doctors are treating these issues naturally and translating the natural health research and science into everyday patient care. And then you can find me at Razi Berry on social media.
I love that. All right. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Kristi.
All right. I'm going to be right back to summarize things and wrap things up on the other side. Just a moment. We'll be right back.
The Truth About Health premieres this month as a weekly JMC Broadcasting production with Kristi Leigh as your show host. Kristi Leigh is an award-winning former mainstream news anchor and independent journalist with more than 20 years of experience in broadcasting. Honored as Best Anchor and Best Enterprise Reporting honors, she later anchored at a Fox affiliate in California before walking away from legacy media after witnessing its deepening lack of journalistic integrity and shift toward propaganda. Kristi is a fearless voice for the voiceless and a staunch advocate for holding power accountable. She's been featured on Fox News, The Bongino Report, InfoWars, Lindell TV, and numerous independent platforms nationwide. She has interviewed high-profile figures including RFK Jr., Dr. Robert Malone, General Michael Flynn, Ron Paul, Kari Lake, and many more. The Truth About Health premieres June 2026 as a weekly JMC Broadcasting production. This weekly broadcast features expert doctors, scientists, and healthcare professionals. We don't reject science, we go further in it. We go beyond symptoms, headlines, and hype, bringing you the truth about what actually heals the body. Thorough healthcare coverage, including new technologies, legislation, and justice, will also be addressed. Sign up for free at jmcbroadcasting.com and tune into The Truth About Health with Kristi Leigh, only on jmcbroadcasting.com.
All right, so we did cover a lot. We talked about the testosterone decline and how if the men in your life are struggling, you know what, they might not tell you. I mean, that's kind of the man thing to do is, oh, I'm fine. But you may want to encourage the man in your life, if he is not feeling his best, to go get checked out. See if he needs something like testosterone therapy. With women, we are exposed. We talked a lot about this exposure of, we have the genome and the exposome. And so there's all these things that can be affecting not just the men, but obviously us women, and hormone disruption. And so maybe you need to get checked out with a naturopath or integrative doctor and find out if you're where you need to be. And now that we have a administration that is more friendly to recognizing that women might need some therapy like HRT, that black box has been removed, and we can also see about integrating that. It does seem like some of us might have given peptides, particularly things like GLP-1. We might have written them off. Perhaps it is something that can be thought of as like a kickstart, or as our guest today, Razi Ann Berry, said, some doctors are having success with microdosing some of these things. And it's not just for weight loss. There's other peptides, as we briefly mentioned, that can address inflammation or healing. And so we need to make sure that we're informed on that issue as well. And then it is summer, that sun's beating down. We are continuing to talk about the chemical exposure to sunscreen and how even that can be related to possible weight gain. It's crazy how all these things can be synergistic in the worst ways possible. So good news is that there are going to be some new options as far as that goes. And we really need to be looking at perhaps mineral sunscreens that you have to apply much more often, but will be much better for you than these highly marketed ones full of chemicals. All right. Well, I hope you enjoy the conversation, and we hope that you'll return each week for health news that is not sponsored by the very companies that make a big bank on keeping you sick or creating more problems. So please go to JMC Broadcasting contributors page. You can follow all our guests' informations that we have on the show. Find it all there, where you can find their sites, books, etc. I'm Kristi Leigh, and thank you again. We'll see you next week for more truth about health.